Jonathan Mann and Brian Frye stop by for a chat. Bitcoin goes mainstream, and Ethereum turns 9. All that and more coming up on Block and Order. Welcome to Block and Order, the show that explores the legal issues facing the world of Web3 and beyond. I'm Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, even though he was scheduled to be there after me, he beat me to Nashville last week, Moish Peltz.
That's right. The quickest man to Nashville.
You sure were. How you doing, Moish? You look really well.
I'm doing great. I picked up my Satoshi t-shirt, which was kind of my goal for, really for this conference, but for any conference, and I'm pretty happy because, I nailed
it. They are pretty nice. Well, since you bought one, I had to buy a different one because it's like when you go out to dinner, I can't get the same thing as you. That defeats the purpose.
Well, I think if you're getting the filet, everyone can get the filet. It's okay. No one's going to be mad that you also got the steak, Kyle. That's true. Although I guess in this is a bad example.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I'd be getting it. Although if you give me enough whiskey, I'll eat just about anything. Well, thank you for joining us on Block and Order. For those of you new to the show, this is a point-counterpoint style program where we discuss the legal issues facing all things blockchain, crypto, Web3, general emerging technologies, and innovation. We try to educate and inform, but in an entertaining way. We try to do it, each segment being only a few minutes long. Sometimes we go over, sometimes we don't. And then we have a lightning round at the end. So thank you for watching. Block and Order is available on all podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. So kicking us off today, Bitcoin 2024. It happened, didn't it, Moish? Well, let's just jump right in. What do you think about it?
Yeah, man, it happened. What do I think about it is, look, there was a lot of speakers that showed up at this conference. A lot of people, very prominent in the political spectrum and the crypto industry spectrum. There were some speakers that were reported to want to go that didn't make it. But I think no matter how you look at it, I think we're going to look back on this particular conference as potentially a turning point in the industry where I think you can sense a real shift, in the way that the industry perceives itself and the way it's interacting with government and also just the industry as a whole maturing. It was a really fascinating conference for a number of reasons.
It's true. No, you hit the nail on the head with that. We go to a lot of these conferences, and I'm sure people who watch this show also go to a lot of them. The general feeling at these events is always, it's very positive. Everybody is always very energetic and excited about the space. We certainly are. But this one definitely marked a bit of a sea change, I felt. You alluded to the speakers that were there, and we'll come right out and I could just list just some of the high profile ones. You had Edward Snowden, Senator Cynthia Lummis, Bill Hagerty, and Tim Scott. Ro Khanna from Congress is there. Alex Gladstein spoke twice, and he's a personal hero of mine. I have his book back there. Michael Saylor was my personal favorite. And of course, presidential candidates RFK Jr. and Republican nominee former President Donald Trump was there. And just, look, you can feel how you want about Trump, but him being there, just his presence alone shines a national spotlight on Bitcoin and this industry as a whole. And that can only mean good things. I mean, the names I just rattled off are from both sides of the political aisle. And I'm glad, you've always maintained, Moish, that crypto should be nonpartisan. And I think putting aside some of the comments that were made, just the level of speakers that were here, I think illustrates that very well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if nonpartisan or bipartisan. Probably bipartisan, because I think ultimately a lot of these issues do overlap with what we need government to do.
Right.
I know there's probably some on the libertarian side, which those views were definitely expressed at the conference of, get my government away from my crypto. And I totally get that. Maybe that's the answer for a lot of crypto. But, I just think we're, even talking about, litigation and our guests that are going to be on later today, some of these, we actually want regulation or we want to define what is regulated and what is not. Right. And in that necessarily requires engagement with both parties. And so it was really fascinating seeing the level of engagement between, prominent people in the industry and the organizers of the conference and other just like, very loud people on social media that are about who was coming to this conference and who was
Right.
not, and kind of expectations going into that. So, I think one part of the conference was definitely just people speculating about what one person had just said or was going to be saying, and I think also, just it was really interesting to hear what different people were taking away from all these different speeches. It was really impossible to see everything at the same time. Michael Saylor, for example, I couldn't watch his keynote, but I did get a chance to watch it on my flight home. And the other things you mentioned a lot about, like, kind of I think we've been dancing around the idea of, like, there's like a vibes check to a lot of these conferences, and a lot of the vibes around conferences often have to do with, like, where the asset price is.
Right.
So, for
Sure.
example, at the last NFT NYC, when, like, all the NFTs were dead, the conference kind of felt a little sad. Like, it's just, like, part of it. But I don't think the vibes here at Bitcoin 2024, which I think the vibes were good, and perhaps, like, just on, like, political vibes, which is also kind of weird. But I think they were overall really good. But I don't think they were good because of, like, Bitcoin being high in, like, dollar amount. I think they were good because the industry is growing up and recognizing that it has political influence if it wields it properly.
Sure. I mean, we can get into some of the specifics about the party platform action items that Trump laid out and RFK Jr. mentioned, and specifically Cynthia Lummis. But Michael Saylor, one point where I think I'll disagree a little bit, where, yes, the vibes were pretty good, but I saw Michael Saylor, I was there in person on Friday, and he basically convinced every single person there, including myself, to liquidate everything we own and just put it right in Bitcoin, because today it's worth, whatever, 68,000, whatever it's at right now. And he said 20 years from now, if you put $10,000 into Bitcoin today, 20 years from now, you will be set for life. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. And everyone for the next 24 hours is saying, oh my God, Michael Saylor, I'm going to sell everything I have.
I watched the same speech as you, and I felt exactly the same way. So who am I to say?
Right.
We'll link the speech we'll link a bunch of the speeches in the show notes. If the Bitcoin 2024 conference has YouTube videos of all the speeches. Definitely the Saylor speech is worth watching.
Sure.
If you're not bullish on Bitcoin, like, warning, be careful before you watch it.
Right, it's true. But you were, so we both saw RFK and we both saw Trump. What are your takeaways from the Trump platform action items, such as they were?
Yeah, so from the Trump action items, I think it's really interesting. I know that the GOP, and we talked about it on our last episode, has included as part of their party platform, basically no CBDCs, the right to self custody, and then I think Donald Trump recognized on stage that when he said, "Oh, and I'm going to fire Gary Gensler," like the whole entire crowd basically got up on their feet, which he did not expect. You can watch the clip; it's pretty funny to see him, like, recognize, oh,
I hit on
you guys
something.
Don't like
right?
Gary Gensler. That's interesting. And I think the other thing, which you mentioned, RFK Jr. and RFK Jr. had kind of previewed this idea that the U.S. Treasury should actually build a strategic reserve, or maybe if it's federally, the U.S. government should build a strategic reserve of Bitcoin, which Trump initially said, I think a little bit, it wasn't quite that far. He said, well, we should just keep the Bitcoin we have, the U.S. being essentially the largest non-Satoshi holder of Bitcoin. And then Senator Lummis came on after him and said, actually, we want to go further. And I think actually, as of today, introduced a proposed bill, Bitcoin Act, to have the U.S. actually go and buy, significant portion of Bitcoin.
Right. She's promoting that we hold 1 million tokens for 20 years and then ultimately use it to pay down the United States debt, because as it appreciates in value, just only good things can come from that. And during the speech, she spoke on Friday, and then spoke again immediately after Trump had wrapped up his remarks, and she referred to it as our Louisiana Purchase moment. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. RFK Jr. was much more bullish. He proposed $4 million to be held back in the reserve, which listen, we'll see what comes of it. Trump also suggested appointing a crypto advisory council, and he did mention designing transparent regulatory guidance, lowering the cost of energy, which he didn't get into specifics about it, but that was a big part of it. I think he said you'll be tired of all the electricity or something like that. And also a very prominent talking point at the conference, they were giving these shirts out, Free Ross, Free Ross. Right. And he did mention commuting the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, who many, is sort of a folk hero in the community.
Yeah, there was actually, I believe Ross's family was like right in the front row.
Oh, is that right?
Near where I was sitting. Yeah, so they were very happy to hear him, commit to freeing Ross on day one of his term or potential term. Yeah, but look, I think this is another thing I heard from a lot of speakers, including Edward Snowden, but also there was a Bitcoin core developer there that spoke. Basically saying, be really careful. These politicians are coming here and they're telling you all the things you want to hear, but they may not necessarily have like the best intentions when it comes to crypto. I mean, really, like I think it's pretty transparent. I don't think anyone in the audience thought otherwise. Like these people are here to earn our vote,
correct? And
they're promising these things to earn that vote. But is that in the best interest long term of crypto? And I think that's for every citizen to make an informed decision and read these speeches and vote, right?
Well, that's obviously the case, and nothing that's never highlighted more than when Trump speaks. And I think even he would probably even admit that to you. I mean, he basically gets out there and says, look at all these great voters. He basically stopped short of saying that, but he basically said that. But to getting back to Anthony Scaramucci's point, just him being there, his presence, now you have Democratic presumptive nominee, you're seeing all the headlines, and we know for a fact that she's reached out and is trying to develop a pro-crypto platform of her own. Just that alone, even if it's all just some speeches and they're trying to garner votes and be that as it may, that's fine. Just their presence alone, positive news for crypto. You're seeing it in the mainstream. That can only mean good things. We'll see what happens at the election, but fair point.
So. Well, we're going to have a few more block and order episodes before then, because otherwise I think we could go for another hour on recapping.
I think we
Nashville.
Can. We'll do a Patreon episode or something like that for
yeah. Comment below if you want a private session with Kyle and I giving our unfiltered thoughts on Nashville.
Cost is 1 Bitcoin.
All right. Next topic. Celsius, the bankrupt crypto platform, is suing. I think there's over 2,000 lawsuits now in individuals and entities that allegedly received preferential transfers of more than $100,000 and now looking to recover those transfers in an adversary proceeding. And then they just filed, like literally in the past couple of weeks, thousands of lawsuits. So prior to those litigations, Celsius had already recovered about $100 million through settlements. They basically offered a flat, I think it was 13.5% recovery, where account holders could basically just come in, pay a flat fee, and settle their case. Some people either didn't do that or just weren't in a position to do that, or in a different class, and are now being sued. So, Kyle, what do you think about the trustee of this bankruptcy now suing essentially customers to claw back money in adversary proceedings?
This isn't the first time we've seen this. We've talked about it previously on the show. We've talked about Voyager. We've had clients of ours who have received these kinds of notices, and they all ask me the same question. How is this remotely fair? And, I give them an answer they don't like. It's, look, I'm a lawyer. My job is not to dispense fairness. It's just that's what the laws are. I give you bad news. My personal feelings are, is I get it. They need to get that money from somewhere, and but I certainly understand the arguments of the people receiving these notices and on the receiving end of this, because they didn't do anything wrong. It's not like they defrauded anybody. They're not acting on inside information. They see which way the wind blows and they act on it. So it's hard to argue with that, even though if the law doesn't agree with that position. I don't know if you agree with that, or if you're a little more bearish on it.
Well, look, I mean, I think bankruptcy, the idea of bankruptcy is to try and, equalize the scales. And, there's a lot of money. Everyone's lost money. That's why we're here. But how do we balance those scales and make sure people, may have taken out more money than others get their fair share?
Fair.
And so here, it's this really difficult case because, there's reasons that people took out money before the bankruptcy filing, besides, oh crap, this thing's going down. Like, This is the Titanic. I better take my money out. People are doing all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so I get in an ordinary course bankruptcy that you have basically, all these kind of partners of a business. You have like service providers and law firms and accounting firms and manufacturings and distributors. And they're all kind of like at risk of this happening. And when that happens, you got to like equalize the scales. Here, I think that the idea that, there's different categories of people being sued, but a large chunk of them are just ordinary customers that either just happened to withdraw some money because they were just withdrawing money usually, or kind of got an inkling that the thing was going to go down and took it out. And it just feels like this is not an avenue where they're going to recover a ton of money from just like ordinary consumers. And it also feels, as you said, it's like incredibly unfair for some.
Yeah, I mean, I get both sides of the position, and it sucks. And I think the example I gave previously was, should Martha Stewart be held accountable because somebody called her up and said, "Hey, you're going to lose all your money. You got to get your money out of here." And she was like, "Oh my God, I don't want to do that." And now she went to jail for insider trade, or house arrest, or whatever it was for insider trade.
But Kyle, that's exactly it. If Martha Stewart was a defendant in this case, no one would feel bad for her. It's the like the mid-level, just imagine a lawyer that has $200,000 to his name and he withdrew it before the thing went bankrupt. And it's like, well, now we want, that was $200,000 in Bitcoin back in 2022. So that's now worth, $1 million. We want $1 million from you. And like, the guy's like, what the hell are you talking about? So, I think there's a lot of those. There's probably more of a numbers basis. There's probably more of those than there are Martha Stewarts.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the point, is like, maybe there should be more of a rank ordering of like, you, sir, are an ordinary citizen and you can kind of keep your money. And you, sir, are a celebrity or a liquidity provider or some other insider. And like, maybe there's a different analysis that we take.
Probably get into some really thorny constitutional issues because wherever that line is drawn could be, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah, and like maybe the bankruptcy code isn't set up to address like these mass consumer crypto bankruptcies.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
All right, moving right along. Binance has announced the launch of a Proof-of-KYC token, the first of its kind, the Binance Account Bound token, or as I'm going to call it, BABIT. The BABIT is issued to users who pass Binance's KYC process, or BAPT.
Wait, was it BABIT or BAPT?
Well,
you got to pick one.
BABIT has better mouthfeel. BAPT is just, it's like it hurts. It probably hurts to hear actually in my earphones. So the BABIT would be issued to users who pass Binance's KYC, know your customer process, and are a type of soul-bound token, which are tokens that represent users' identity and achievements in the Web3 ecosystem. The BABITs have three key properties thus far. They are non-transferable between individuals. Obviously, you can't transfer a know your customer authorization to somebody else. That would be ridiculous. It's obvious. They can't be transferred between one person's addresses for similar reasons, and they can be revoked by the issuer but minted again within 72 hours. And just so everybody knows, know your customer is the banking protocol whereby you verify your identity to a bank, institutional lender, or other platform, basically where you are putting your money. Moish, skepticism does abound, but where do you land on this? What do you think about the BABIT?
It's not the right word for it, whatever it is. Look, I think the idea, and we've seen several examples of this, of having an issuer issue a KYC token that's soul bound to the issuing address, and then that address can go and it can prove like I am a U.S. citizen, I'm an accredited investor, I can buy, sell, and trade securities on a whim. I think that's awesome. I think that's way better, and creating a real marketplace of people buying and selling, what I would consider like real crypto asset securities and not like JPEGs, requires a technology like that, right? The problem is, I think, is there's an issuer here, which is Binance, and I think that's going to be great for the Binance system. But I'm kind of skeptical that beyond like the immediate Binance ecosystem, anyone else is going to be using this token. And maybe that's fine. Maybe it's like, look,
Sure,
Binance is solving a Binance problem. That's kind of what they're doing here. They're not trying to bite off more than they can chew. But I think ultimately it would be cool to have a token that would work across multiple ecosystems. And maybe that would include Binance, or maybe that would include a consortium of people like Binance and other
I think you're right.
Exchanges. But it'll be interesting to see how these tokens work across different ecosystems, across different jurisdictions, things like that. So that's kind of where I want to see where this is trending.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I see this as like a beta test of the kind of the use case of a token like this, because the reality is that if I go to TD Bank, I have to KYC over there, and then I go to Chase, I have to KYC over there. If anybody's done that process, for regular old me, it's like a very prolonged rectal exam that is not fun. And if you can simplify that process and say, all right, well, I already did it over here, I can do it over there. I mean, we don't have that like here in the US. Like you have this kind of token that can achieve that. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't think this is going to change the way we bank, but I think it's a step in the right direction, and we'll see what happens with the implementation of this going forward. Worth noting that the launch.
I agree, but I do think the evolution of the KYC token and tokenizing technology will ultimately revolutionize the way we think. We're just not there yet.
We're not there yet. One day, maybe not today.
We'll see.
We'll see.
All right, our next topic: the IRS's Operation Hidden Treasure, which was aimed to catch cryptocurrency holders trying to evade U.S. taxes, has reportedly only achieved minimal success, according to the IRS the agency's Inspector General. So, as you might remember, back in 2021, the IRS launched a program called Operation Hidden Treasure, focused on acquiring data analytics tools, software licenses, and training employees to help enforce tax compliance in the blockchain space. So as a result, the IRS basically obtained over 600 licenses, primarily with Chainalysis, TRM, and some of these other large analytics providers, spending over $40 million. But as a result of that, it doesn't seem like they've actually recovered a lot of like unpaid taxes yet. So, Kyle, what do you think? Is that surprising?
It's not surprising. I mean, you see this a lot with a lot of these government investigations. The most famous one that I remember from a couple of years ago was where, I forget which state it was or which agency it was, but they were trying to find out people who were abusing welfare because they were on drugs, and they spent tens of millions of dollars trying to uncover the abuse, and they ended up finding, I don't know, $500,000 or something like that. And they celebrated it. Look at all this abuse we found, but the money that they spent had dwarfed it. And just as an amusing aside, when you said Operation Hidden Treasure, just the first thing that popped into my head was Operation One-Eyed Willie. I don't know why it just popped in there.
I don't know what that is. It sounds like a weird operation.
That's from the Goonies.
If you ask me.
One-Eyed Willie.
How
I was thinking of Tom
you.
Petty's Hidden Treasures. Like, that's amazing Sirius XM radio show.
That's pretty good, but I can't believe you did. Oh, dude, you get a 0 for the day. You didn't recognize the Goonies reference. Matt Foreman would be so upset with you. I'm going to tell him.
Wait, it's a Goonies thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, since 2020, the IRS has spent over $47 million on this with blockchain analytics companies that specialize in these transactions, namely Chainalysis. And the limitations that are believed to be abound here is that most crypto changes hands off chain through the exchanges. So it's hard to even track it if you want to be able to find it. So I'm curious. I feel like this was kind of doomed from the start. I don't think they were doing it the right way, and they had reached a point of forward momentum that they couldn't really undo it. That's what it looks like to me.
I'm surprised by this. I gotta say, I'm completely surprised, because the thesis was, and I think the reason the IRS went down this road is, crypto is this like like thicket of non-tax compliant people, and they're abound. And if only we could just like throw a dart, we would hit someone that has $1 billion of like unpaid crypto taxes. And here they've been going for 3 years, and they haven't. That hasn't realized. And I'm frankly a little surprised about that. I think, and the thesis was that we should be able to find tons of non-compliant taxpayers, and it just doesn't seem like that's the case. So like, I don't think it's the training. I don't think it's the software. I don't think it's the lack of effort in trying. I just think that they just haven't found it. I'm kind of puzzled.
I think that they launched it in 2021 and they didn't evolve as the landscape evolved with it. I think they got kind of stuck in whatever protocols they had at the time. That's
I don't agree, because if you look at the golden age of crypto tracing, it's backwards looking. It's saying, okay, here we are in 2020. Let's look over the past 5 years and just find all the Bitcoiners that haven't paid taxes. And I would have expected they would have come up with some names.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why are they spending $50 million? Or maybe,
yeah. I don't know.
I'm surprised. I want to know more. Like I need to talk to the Inspector General and get to the bottom of this.
All right. We will definitely have an update as the situation unfolds.
If you are the IRS Inspector General, please come on Block and Order and explain your findings.
Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Elon Musk is the second best person on the planet at keeping his name in the news. And recently he announced that humanoid robots will enter low production for internal use in the Tesla factory starting next year, with hopes of high production for other companies by 2026. Tesla would use the robot for internal uses first, and they would be doing what he described as difficult chores, dangerous chores that you don't necessarily want a person to be involved in, with the goal of reducing labor shortages, was how he put it. The prototype was launched in 2022, named Optimus. And Optimus, when it was launched, took a few steps, waved to a crowd, and performed basic dance moves, which I vaguely remember seeing. And look,
everyone loves a dancing robot. Yeah.
We all saw Terminator. We all saw iRobot. We've all seen RoboCop. Moish, what do you think? Is this Elon Musk just kind of touting himself? Do you think this is practical, or are we already here? I mean, you go to a McDonald's, there's no humans there anymore. You just punch numbers on the screen. I mean, I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, why shouldn't there be Optimus humanoid robots building our Tesla Cybertrucks? This is the future we've asked for, Kyle.
It's true.
I mean, I don't know. Why would... I don't know. I think it's hard to doubt Elon Musk because he's done so many incredible, ridiculous things. And I think he's found a way to keep his name in the news. Yeah, because the showboating. But look, I mean, there weren't really electric cars, and then there were, and he
100%
annoyed people, but he got the job done. And the same thing with SpaceX. There was not a private space industry, and now there is. So, who am I to doubt him? If he wants to make humanoid robots, like, why does he have any less likely chance to break into the mainstream than anyone else? Actually, calling back to Nashville, I heard he was over flight during the Sunday speeches, but did not land. So I don't know what happened there, but I think he also tried to make some crypto news, but he didn't show up.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, I agree with you. And that's another thing I've always said before. Listen, love him or hate him, he has brought the electric vehicle market to where it is today. And it's not perfect, but it was nowhere when he burst onto the scene. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for it, because people thought he was crazy. He is very heavily invested in it. And, look, if we can do things, this is not always the most popular opinion, but if we can do things cheaper and more efficiently, and if that means using robots instead of human beings, I think it's something worth exploring. You don't want to remove the human element of it. You want people to keep their jobs. But at the end of the day, robots, they're not going to need cigarette breaks. They're not going to fall asleep on the job. They're not going to, you're not going to have those kinds. They have other issues, but you're not going to have those kinds of issues. I think it's worth exploring. And I think it's really interesting.
Well, if you look at, I think, some of the reasons that Elon Musk was disliked, by the current political administration, it has to do with the idea that they don't have union employees, and I think that's a big break between the other large American car manufacturers.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the answer is like, well, let's lean into this. Like, if we don't have a union, like, why even have humans at all? I guess we'll see.
Do you remember? I'm going to put you on the spot again with the movies. So RoboCop, do you remember what the 3 prime directives were? Without looking it up? I know it's from memory.
No, I do not.
It was protect the innocent, serve the public trust, and uphold the law. Bam. It may not have been in that order, but that
could be like blocking orders. Like
yeah, exactly.
That's it's probably one of the better. I just watched the Beverly Hills Cop on Netflix, the new one.
Nice.
And those two are like the best Detroit movies, I think.
It's true. The first RoboCop is one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. I will stand by
yeah.
it. I'd buy that for $1.
I'd buy that for $1.
That's the.
That's right. Well, it's Paul Verhoeven, right?
Yeah, nice. It's
yeah. Starship Troopers is like
also excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right, we could talk about Paul Verhoeven all day, but we'll stop it at Showgirls and move on to CrowdStrike. Hey, everybody, remember that? The worldwide tech outage from a couple weeks ago after a defective update from cybersecurity company CrowdStrike has raised questions about automating software upgrades and whether a handful of dominant suppliers, especially in the cloud, concentrates risk to a dangerous extent. IT leaders, basically in the wake of this really just need to ensure that their vendors integrated with their systems maintain high standards in development, testing, and release of software updates, because the ramifications of this, I think we got off kind of easy. And I say we globally, not me, because I'll get into what happened to me afterwards, although I'm sitting here, so I can't really complain. But I think there are a lot of implications of when we rely on this technology for our air traffic and our general infrastructure and our medical billing, and our hospitals are reliant on the software. Our law firm uses software like this. Like, what happens when this stuff really crashes? Like, what do you like, Moish? What are we walking into here?
Well, look, I mean, we keep saying like the world is gonna digitize whether we like it or not. Everything that was analog is becoming digital, and the result is when you have an outage, you're seeing the effects can be, nearly catastrophic. I think you're right. We probably dodged. I mean, it's kind of insane that like every Windows computer just like didn't work for, a few hours. And it's like, oh, okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
But that's really what happened. And thankfully we have redundancies and we were able to kind of reset the system, but it does kind of portend a more dangerous future where everything's relying upon systems that, it's kind of the XKCD cartoon where there's like a whole like modern financial system and there's like one little block kind of holding it up.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, here we saw like someone kind of flicked the block and the whole thing fell down. And you have to put the pieces back.
Yeah. Not ideal. And it was really not ideal when en route to Nashville, we can flash the picture. It was so quaint when my flight was supposed to take off at 2:30 in the afternoon, and it was around 3:15, and I'm standing by the gate, and my loving wife took a picture of me with a big smile on my face because we were about to board the plane, and we did. And then we sat there for like half a day, and here's all right, I'm going to rant about Delta for a minute. Here's the thing. I'm a lawyer. Shit happens. I understand that. And I get paid to deliver bad news. That's fine. But what I don't do is I don't give different people different answers when they ask me a question just because I don't want them to harass me. And Delta Airlines, damn it all, if I ask you a question, I expect the same answer from the different people along the assembly line of underpaid workers that you set before me to solve my problems.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, would a humanoid robot solve that?
Well, at least they
give you a consistent answer.
Well, they wouldn't lie to me. They wouldn't be able to.
Unless that's not in their prime directive.
Unless that's the fourth prime directive. Lie to Kyle Lawrence when he asks you what's going on with the plane. Right.
Well, I have to say, I took Delta the next morning, and I happened to arrive perfectly on time, actually a little bit early. But while we were boarding the flight, like they had done nothing wrong. Flight was on time. Everything was great. The flight attendant like preemptively apologized for like all of Delta. I'm so sorry. Everything's going to be okay. And I was like, well, I'm doing fine.
Yeah. I will say, and to credit to everybody on the plane, the flight crew, they were fantastic. They were. I mean, listen, they were the least responsible people
right.
for the situation, and they were very nice and friendly, and they did everything they could to make us comfortable. And everybody on the flight, a lot of whom who were going to the conference, everyone remained in good spirits, and nobody lost their minds. Like you see all these things on Instagram about people just going
Right.
nuts over seat changing and all that. I'm very happy that good, we remained, in well repute. But Delta Airlines, come on, clean it up.
All right. Well, up next, we have a special treat. With us are going to be Jonathan Mann and Brian Frye. As you may have seen in the news, Jonathan Mann wrote, directed, and released the song and music video "I'm Suing the SEC," and claps for Jonathan and Brian, who are co-plaintiffs against the Securities Exchange Commission. And not only did they release a song, they released an excellent music video, which Jonathan put together over the last 6 months. And as if a song and a music video were not enough, an artful complaint put together and filed by them, and it's really something to behold. If you haven't read it, I would suggest reading it. It really comes to some excellent points that we've been talking about on Block and Order, just about the confluence of intellectual property law and art and securities law, and the way the government has been failing at providing real guidance for artists and creators in this industry. So they really hit the nail on the head. It's going to be a fascinating case to follow and see how it goes. And we're really lucky to have Jonathan and Brian on the show with us. So with that said, over to our interview.
All right. Well, welcoming to the show, Jonathan Mann, the Song of Day Man, and Brian Frye. Welcome, gentlemen. Really appreciate having you on. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, same. Delighted to be on the show.
We are indeed delighted to have you. So why don't you just give us a quick rundown of why did we invite you on the show? What makes you guys so special?
So for context, Brian and I are both in our in our semi-professional lives NFT artists. I have been writing a song a day for the last 16, almost 17 years.
Wow.
And I've been selling them as NFTs on the blockchain for the last almost 3 years every day. I got interested in NFTs very early, way back in 2017. They weren't really a thing for a long time, and then they became a thing, and now they're not really a thing anymore again. But I still sell them every day, and they've basically become my livelihood, more or less, which is what I had hoped would happen when I first discovered them. And this all really started, this saga that we've embarked upon, where we are suing the Securities and Exchange Commission. That saga began when the SEC went after Stoner Cats, which was an NFT project that was launched in 2021, was extremely successful at the height of all the hype, raised $8 million, had a gas war situation happen on Ethereum mainnet. I mentioned to Brian the other day that my friend Superfizz literally lost 8 ETH, about $32,000 in trying to mint a Stoner Cat.
In the gas wars. Wow.
In the gas wars.
Just for gas wars.
Just for gas wars. So this was like a big deal. Like most NFT projects, the price kind of fizzled over time. However, they did deliver what they set out to do, which was they made 8 episodes of a hand-animated show about stoned cats called Stoner Cats. And fast forward, they launched in 2021. In September of 2023, the world learned that they had been hit with an SEC action that said that they had been selling unregistered securities, that the SEC was basically claiming that every single cat JPEG that Stoner Cats had sold was an offering of an unregistered security, and so they levied against them a $1 million fine and a bunch of other onerous things that were very distressing.
Right.
The thing that really got me was I read through this complaint that the SEC did, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't know that much about this kind of stuff, but like I kept waiting for the bit in reading the thing for the part where they explained what made it a security, because it seemed to me, we all know the Howey test. We all have to know the Howey test being here in crypto.
We do indeed. Yep.
It seemed to me reading through this thing that I couldn't understand where the security part was.
Right.
And then furthermore, everything that they were accusing Stoner Cats of were things that all of us were doing. The things that they were saying were A, not securities, and B, just common practice among every single NFT creator.
That's exactly right.
I think that's right. I think you can read that order as every NFT project that ever sold NFTs is a security.
Which just Brian and I have talked about this a lot. Like, it made me so angry. Like, it made me physically, I felt physically angry, and I channeled that anger into a song called "This Song Is a Security," where I sort of poked fun at the SEC and said, this song that I'm writing, clearly based on what you just said, is a security. What should I do, Gary, with this song? And that was the moment of the sort of, wheels starting to turn about, well, what could we actually do? Is there an actual path here to try to hold the SEC somewhat accountable in some modest way or something? And then Brian can take the story.
Yeah. I mean, so that's where I kind of got involved. So Jonathan got in touch with Jason Gottlieb and Morrison Cohen, and they were planning to bring an action, but wanted to, have at least one additional plaintiff to accompany Jonathan. And when Jason asked him, can you think of anyone who would be a good person to approach? Lo and behold, my name was on the tip of his tongue for reasons you may already be aware of, but I'll kind of share a kind of a potted version of it for your listeners. So, for me, this is actually kind of the culmination of what I would characterize as almost a 20-year-long kind of intellectual project that began back when I was a junior associate securities lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell in New York City, right? So I was doing a lot of securities-related work and thinking about sort of what is a security and what isn't, these kind of difficult ontological questions in relation to some of the issues we were litigating at the law firm. And, like many securities lawyers, before going to law school, I went to art school, and I also had a kind of artistic practice.
A natural path, obviously.
Like many lawyers.
Yeah.
And so the more I looked at the way the SEC and the courts talked about securities from a kind of ontological perspective, like, these kind of deep philosophical questions about what is or isn't within the basket of things that we call a security, the more it sounded like they were talking about artwork in the art market to me. And specifically, the more it sounded like they were talking about conceptual art, right? Because, of course, when it comes to conceptual art, the art is the concept, not any object, right? And the way that the art market transacts in conceptual art is through certificates that are issued by the artist and represent ownership of a single edition of the artwork. I mean, you don't have to squint very hard to see a certificate for work conceptual art as being a kind of physical NFT, as it were, right? So it really bothered me at the time, and I was like, well, how can that be? Like, conceptual art is a security, that kind of doesn't make sense. And I would talk to securities lawyers who I knew about it, and they were like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone buy something like that? that. My artist friends were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Securities, this is foreign language for me.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought about this for a long time, as I was practicing, as I started teaching, and I was really struggling with how to take this idea and explain it in a way that would feel real and salient to people. And what eventually struck me was that the problem was I was thinking about it too much like an academic and not enough like an artist. And that I needed to really kind of activate the idea to make it feel real and tangible. So what I did was I wrote a law review article that I styled as a prospectus for the sale of a work of conceptual art titled SEC No Action Letter Request. And the work of conceptual art consisted of sending a no action letter request to the SEC proposing to sell a work of conceptual art that had all the features of what the SEC called a security. In the no action letter request, they said, this is what I'm doing. This is why I believe what I'm doing satisfies all of your stated criteria for being a security that requires registration. Therefore, in my opinion, in order to do what I'm proposing to do, I think I need to register this. Tell me why I don't have to register this. Right? In other words, basically, I sent a no action letter request saying, a friend of mine characterized it as the first ever SEC action letter request, right?
Exactly. Please.
Come regulate me, bro, right?
Come at me, bro.
Right, exactly.
Right?
It's incredible.
And they just ignored me. I mean, as you can imagine, they just ignored me. And this was 2019, right? And so, I kind of the project made the rounds a little bit. It got mentioned by Matt Levine among some other people, and then I kind of let it sit for a while because I wasn't sure where to go next with it. And then lo and behold, 2021, the NFT market explodes, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" Right? It's like I fell asleep, dreamed of a beautiful imaginary market and nothing, and then I woke up and there it was.
Yeah, right.
Right? And I was like, well, this is amazing because when I first did the project, everyone said, well, that's not really a security because no one would actually buy it. Right? And I was like, well, point me to where in the Howey test it says anything about people actually buying it, because I don't see that as being a requirement, right? But also, like,
a robust market of purchasers is not the
exactly.
Right? But then I was also like, but that's not true. People have been buying conceptual art, since Duchamp, right? Conceptual art is as old as the securities markets are. Right, or at least the kind of modern regulated securities markets are, right? So I was like, well, that just doesn't work. But then an NFT market came along, and I was like, well, here we go. Right. So I just reissued the project as an NFT, sent another no action letter request to the SEC saying, well, I'm doing the new project. I'm doing the same project. I'm just doing it with NFTs instead of with paper certificates now. I still think it's an unregistered security, but you didn't respond to my last no action letter request. So I'm just going to take that as tacit acceptance on your part that what I'm doing is
you're in the clear. Yeah.
Totally copacetic. No problem whatsoever. Went ahead and sold it. And
not legal advice, everybody.
Don't do that. No.
have to do it.
Right. But so I then went ahead and sold the entire collection in half an hour or something. This is the heady days of any NFTs that were, and then started just writing in this area. Quite a few academic papers since then, a bunch of other NFT projects since then. So I've kind of been this thorn in the SEC side, and I kind of feel like I was telling people for years, like, if you listen to the SEC and you take them at their word, right, they have regulatory authority over all of this, and that's crazy.
Right. And one of the things we've always, and thank you very much both, for the explanation. It's fascinating stuff. Moish and I we this is what we want. We love this kind of thing. These kinds of
and I think all four of us share this. Yeah. We do our best art at the intersection of art and securities law and
right.
I think both of you. I mean, Jonathan, I think your two biggest bangers have been I'm a security and I'm suing the SEC. Just from the legal perspective, I guess. But I think the legal and the securities law and the intellectual property law and the art and the NFTs, like that's what we live for on this show. So
right.
So yeah.
And Brian, you raise a really great point, and it's something that we've been talking about on the show. It's something I talk about as part of my securities practice. It's the SEC has taken this position that, hey, if you just come in and register, we're your friends, we'll help you. And that's insanity. If you walk into the SEC, they will hand you a subpoena and show you the door, and you're really in a bad way. So you're absolutely right. It's really
I mean,
stuff.
look, Brian, we've talked about this at conferences before, and clients have come up to us like, "Hey, can we do this?" Like, well, there is an option. You can submit a no action letter, but then there's like, well, they might just ignore you,
right?
And so you're going to do all this work,
exactly,
and you're going to pay in a counsel to do that. And like, well, and then they probably think it's a security anyways because there's an NFT involved. So,
although we do think that. One of the reasons that I made it an appealing person to add to the lawsuit was the fact that I had sent these two no action letters in the past, that I had proposed and created projects that were, took this form in the past, and that I, was ready to create a new project that was, to put it bluntly, designed to be exactly identical to Stoner Cats, except more so, with the explicit intention of saying to the SEC, tell me why this conceptual artwork, why explain to me the basis for your belief that you think that you can register this as a security, because it's very obviously a work of conceptual art.
Yeah.
And that's how the complaint starts, right? I love how the complaint starts with the line, this case is about art. And that is really the point, right? Which is the SEC, and Brian talks about this all the time, the SEC has a very specific mandate, and it does not include art. And if it does, then something's seriously messed up, because it shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah, and one thing I really like to point out as well is, like, look, we have to look at this from a practical perspective, right? Everyone talks about the Howey test. I actually think that's a huge mistake, right? For two reasons. The first one is the Howey test is totally empty, right? It's meaningless, right? Literally any economic transaction can fit into the Howey test if you wanted to. All you have to do is characterize it in the right way, and there it is. And that's why I've always referred to the fifth, secret factor of the Howey test is the only one that matters, right?
Yep.
It's whatever the SEC wants to regulate. It just tells you, well, it falls under Howey, therefore we're allowed to regulate it. So it's purely discretionary on the part of the SEC. I think the real substance of the Howey test comes elsewhere in the opinion, right? It's where the Supreme Court says we don't look to how the issuer characterizes what they're doing. We look to the economic reality of the transaction that they're proposing, right? And that was literally the whole point of Howey, right? That, what was the defendant and Howey doing, right? They were setting up a transaction such that it appeared to be the sale of orange groves when it was actually the sale of a securitized investment in an orange growing operation. And it's effectively what the court said. You can't make it not a security by saying magic words and characterizing it the right way. We look at what you're actually selling. Well, let's think about the art market that way, right? The art market existed when the SEC was created. The art market existed when the 33 and the 34 Acts were written into law, right? And yet they didn't say regulate the art market, right? The SEC didn't try to regulate the art market. Literally not a single person ever thought, even if people who thought the art market needed regulation, didn't think the SEC was the agency that created to, intended to, or frankly capable of regulating the art market. And it's been,
that's definitely true.
We have almost 100 years of history of the SEC not regulating the art market, right? And now they want to say, oh yeah, that's always been within our authority to do, because there's literally there's no difference between selling art as a physical object or as a certificate and selling art as an NFT. So if they can regulate the NFT market, they can regulate the art market too.
And we've seen that argument made a few times now when people have requested comment or countersued the SEC, and they say, listen, if you're telling us that what we're doing is a security, then when I go and buy a bottle of whiskey at the store, you're telling me that's a security. You have to draw a line somewhere, and I think you guys are really onto something. And when you talk about the ethereal fifth element of the Howey test and how they've completely misapplied it, as a securities attorney, I perk up. but I'd be curious to hear your take on what you think striking down Chevron means for the SEC, specifically when they start doing things like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
It means nothing. Actually, it means nothing whatsoever.
Okay.
And I can actually, I can explain to you why. I think actually Todd Phillips and Bo Bowman have done a better job, right? So when we think about the major questions doctrine as it intersects with Chevron and Loper Price, right? What they're really about is the agency itself interpreting the scope of regulatory authority given to it by Congress. That's not what's happening here, right?
Yeah.
Because the SEC isn't interpreting the power given to it by Congress. The SEC is actually interpreting the power recognized by the Supreme Court already, right? So it's doing something, it's effectively doing the opposite of what's at stake in the major questions doctrine and in the sort of now defunct Chevron doctrine. Although Chevron Skidmore, I honestly don't think it makes that much difference which one you pick. You know, take your deference. Yeah. Deference is deference. But actually, this is a really, and the reason the litigation is, I think, important and an important way to go is that it's the courts who have already defined what the scope of the authority of the SEC is, but they haven't returned to that question in a really, really long time. And they haven't thought about it in a kind of programmatic way, thinking about what the role of the agency actually is. So I think that that's why this is really important and something that needs to happen. And also a reason maybe the SEC doesn't want it to happen. Because it's kind of a nice place for an agency to operate, right? Under a 90-year-old Supreme Court opinion that basically just said, do whatever the hell you want.
Well, so I mean, I can imagine, because we've heard the argument so many times, and the now the star map of securities crypto regulation decisions, the SEC coming in and saying, well, NFTs are amorphous and they could cover all sorts of things from art to legitimate securities offerings representing tokenized equity. In fact, there are companies that do that. Where do we draw the line? How couldn't you imagine an art company looking more like a tokenized Reg D offering if you structure it in a certain way? So I guess the question is, what outcome are you looking to achieve here? I know we all want guidance, but how, what kind of guidance are you hoping to elicit, or you hope will come as a result?
Yeah. Well, Moish, I think this is a great question. Right? Because it's in a way I would characterize it as almost like the slippery slope question, right? It's like, well, if we say you can't do this, where do we draw the line? How do we know what they can and can't do? It's crazy, it's crazy observation, right? We have 90 years of the SEC knowing the difference between art and securities. Yeah. So I don't know. I draw the inference from that it's not that hard to do.
I have a question that I always think about when that question comes up. Were Bowie bonds explicitly securities?
Yeah.
Were Bowie bonds
yes,
were
they were. They were
like legitimate. Yeah.
Well,
so there you go. I think that answers it. If an artist does the Bowie bond, that's a security, right?
Yeah. Well, and the Bowie bonds were very different too, right? Because when Bowie issued the Bowie bonds, they were very explicitly tied to the revenue streams from his
catalog.
His catalog, right? So the Bowie bonds entitled you to a securitized interest in that revenue stream, which is totally different from what happens when you buy an artwork. You're not buying an interest in a securitized.
You're not expecting any dividends or anything from the artist's work. Yeah.
Well,
it's definitely
there are. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there are NFT projects that do make those promises, and maybe they're dumb and they are violating securities laws. But I guess if I were an artist, and wouldn't that be an enticing thing to offer? And maybe then I should go and talk to a securities attorney. But I guess the question is I don't think there's ever going to be like a binary. Well, now it's a Bowie bond,
right?
Line, and so I can tell you. But maybe the answer is for ordinary course. Art sales, NFTs are the vehicle by which it's definitively not a security.
I can tell you for sure that Stoner Cats didn't do anything like that, and there was nothing in their thing where it was promising anything like that. That's why when I was reading it, I was like, what am I reading? What am I even
right.
looking at?
Well, they were just a bunch of artists that got together and created these characters. And from what I recall of the case, when it came out in 23, it was, well, you have Ashton Kutcher, you have Mila Kunis. Obviously, you're doing that to juice interest, and that's why people expect it. It's like, well, they were just like friends with this. Like, it's, I don't know. It
That's
just
the
seems
point of making
gross.
art. You think you don't want
Right.
people to see your art? Like,
Right.
They make a big deal in that complaint about them, how much they promoted it. It's like, well, yes, that's our job as artists, partly is to promote what we do.
So I would say if you want to characterize an investment in the art market as an investment and kind of identify what you're investing in, I would say that the subject matter of the investment is raw commercial goodwill.
Interesting.
And that's it, right? Yeah. And I don't think we would characterize investment in raw commercial goodwill in any other context as being a securitized interest, right? Because it doesn't have a dollar value attached to it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's really interesting to see because a lot of times these projects get dinged, even if they follow the guidance that you're talking about right here, Brian. And it's, we're not saying you're going to make any money. We're not doing all these things. It's almost like the founders of the project, they can't help themselves. Eventually they get interviewed or they go on Twitter and they make some slip up, even inadvertently, and they say something along the lines of, you're going to make a lot of money if you do this, and bam.
Or the social media manager puts a rocket emoji.
A rocket emoji, absolutely.
Right. Something that innocuous.
But I mean, realistically, how is that any different from an artist saying, I'm a great artist, I'm going to be super famous, and if you buy my artwork now, when I'm super famous, my artwork is going to be worth more money.
Right.
And the SEC would never go after a non-NFT artist. And that's, and the fact that they've gone after Stoner Cats and Impact Theory, it makes so little sense, and that's why we're bringing the case. We're arguing that we feel, and I can say genuinely I do, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday it's just as likely that they would come after Brian or me.
Sure.
For things that we do in good faith.
Ready. Yeah.
For things that
Brian's asking for it.
Come on. Yeah. I mean, Brian literally tried, So
that's great.
So that's really the crux of it, why we're doing it.
All right. Well, Jonathan, I want to know, how are you going to continue doing Song a Day when you're doing wall-to-wall press for this? Do you have a stash of songs stashed up for this, or is what's the plan?
Well, I mean, as I'm sure I feel like a lot of the hard work is done now. Like, now it's just a lot of waiting. Now it's just like we just got to wait and wait and wait. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am to write a song about whatever response we get. I mean, that's going to be great day, that's going to be really exciting for me. So that's part of my art. That's part of my whole thing. I write about what happens in my life, and when I'm suing the SEC and I get a response from them, that's going to be a song, of some kind.
Well, the brain drudgery of, discovery, and I can just imagine the discovery deficiency letter jingle that's gonna spring from this.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I'm really excited to hear.
I personally can't wait for the deposition.
Oh my god! Yeah. Brian, you'll be so good in the deposition. I can't even. Yeah.
I wonder how many extensions they're going to ask for in their answer. Though they are the government, they're going to take their sweet time in getting back to you. That's probably for sure.
Seems likely. Yeah. So I mean, that's what it feels like to me now. Now it's just I get to sit around and wait, and wait.
Just like working for the government.
Yeah.
So you said you had 17,000 songs. Really quickly, just kind of as we run low on time. Of all those songs, is there one that stands out as being a particular favorite of yours? Do you have one that's your baby?
I don't. To be clear, it's 17 years of songs, which is only 5,000.
5,600?
600.
Okay, wow.
Actually, almost 5,700. I'm like 8 days away from 5,700. So.
Wow. Mazel tov.
No, no, I don't have a favorite song. That's a lot of songs, and I forget, most of them. So a lot of times what happens, I go back and I'll listen. I post them all on Spotify, so I listen. I'll be like, oh, that's a good song. I
That's
remember
good.
writing that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm Suing the SEC is a banger, man. My wife is
Thank
like,
you.
Pretty good.
Thank you.
it's
Yeah.
driving,
Pretty good.
it's driving
Yeah.
her crazy. She like walks around the apartment singing it. So
Like that one, for instance, like I spent a good amount of time writing that song and like working on it. So that happens occasionally.
How did the video come together? Because it's so well produced.
Thank you.
Is that something that you worked on yourself? Is there a team involved?
No, it's all me. Similarly, just like many months of work.
Wow.
I finished the song, and then I had the idea. I sort of in my mind am like a little bit like this entire thing is like a little bit like a TV show, a little bit like feels a little bit like a, I don't know. Yeah, like a TV show of some kind. And so I was thinking about, like TV openings, and the song too kind of felt like a TV opening to me almost. So then I thought about Too Many Cooks, if you remember Too Many Cooks.
Yes.
We
will not show the whole thing on the
too many Garys,
such
yes.
a wonderful piece.
Incredible.
And so I was like, can I make my version of Too Many Cooks? And then actually over the I'd say 6 months of working on this song, this video, the AI tools over that time developed so rapidly that many ideas that were not possible at the beginning I'd be like, oh wow, I can put Gary and me into these scenes very easily now. And I'm like, okay, well then I just have to like pick the right, I was like Laverne and Shirley, and I was like, I keep joking that it's like a lot of, I'm like 42, so it's a lot of like elder millennial reference points, like old Star Trek, and like old Happy Days that, used to come on or whatever. Those are my reference points for this kind of TV. Yeah. So, and I kept changing it. Like I had one thing where, one of the lawyers involved, I had a version where there was like a naked like a naked me in one of the pieces, but it was like me when I was like 25, naked. So it was like young naked Jonathan was one of the characters, young naked Jonathan, and he was like, "I love it, it's great.
That's
Maybe
great.
take out the naked Jonathan." And
Maybe.
I was like, "Okay,
Right.
okay, all right, I'll remove that. That's fine." Yeah.
So last question, and then I think we can let you guys go. For our attorney audience, I heard that you guys have the legal spend covered, but from a getting the word out, from an advocacy perspective, what can other attorneys in the industry do to move the cause forward?
I mean, I'd love to hear people just talk about the lawsuit and its implications more. I'd love for people to, tell any journalists they know that, this is a story they should be covering and they should be taking seriously. I think it's one that maybe some people don't fully understand why it matters and why it's important.
Sure.
And so kind of getting that word out there would be great. If any attorneys or lawyers are looking for, someone to talk about it, I'm always available. So.
Well, great. Well, we're going to have you back on once the case starts moving after the government gets their 3
Definitely
extensions.
after the answer, for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Sweet.
Well, gentlemen, we greatly appreciate your time. We know your time is very valuable. You've been making the rounds, so we just really appreciate you stopping by Block and Order. Should artists have to register their artwork before selling it to the general public? And stay tuned for future episodes to find out.
We'll find
best
out.
Of luck to
We'll
you guys.
see.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate
So
it.
long.
Well, Jonathan Mann and Brian Frye, that was really scintillating stuff. It really was. Just love seeing guys just the cojones of what they're doing, and just they're so erudite. That was phenomenal, Moish. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, it's such a fun vibe, and hearing them speak about it, you can tell they just like exude excitement about the lawsuit and everything. And I'm just really excited to see how it plays out, and also really to see the content that continues to spring forth from Jonathan every day, including, as we've heard, just more music related to the lawsuit. So I think that's going to be great to follow.
Yeah, please stay tuned for more episodes of Block and Order to just find out what happens with this. We'll definitely be covering it. Now, on to the lightning round. Known Origin announced on July 17th that it will be shutting down its chain marketplace and Minter. While the terms of the deal have not been disclosed, this decision is quite surprising because it comes just 2 years after the platform was acquired by eBay. Despite the closure, Known Origin emphasized that its existing NFTs remain fully functional and tradable. Number go up, number go down.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, DraftKings, the sports gambling company, is shutting down its NFT business effective immediately. The company sent an email to its customers. Basically, recently, a judge in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts allowed a class action lawsuit against DraftKings to proceed, finding that the plaintiffs had plausibly pled that the NFTs were unregistered securities.
Yeah. Oh, well, easy come, easy go. I remember we covered that when they launched it.
Short-lived, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Happy birthday, Ethereum. Tuesday, July 30th. Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum and producer of its white paper, wished it a happy birthday back in 2015 when the network was launched and the first block was mined. Apparently, however, some are arguing that it was in 2013 when Vitalik first conceived of a general-purpose blockchain built for decentralized applications, and so there's dissension as to when the actual birthday is. I think the father knows when the birthday is, just like when people question you when you tell them what their birthday is. I never understood why people do that. Yes, I know when my birthday is.
Well, I think Vitalik was the one that said, well, the white paper might be the right date. But I think I agree. Like, it's confusing. I think there's a good argument that the white paper, it's like, well, this is the concept. That's the date. The Bitcoin white paper, that's also the date. So there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. No right answer. All right. So digital banking startup Mercury has announced that the cessation of its services for startups in several countries, prominently including Ukraine and Nigeria, citing regulatory challenges and operational complexities in those issues. That's definitely come with some controversy, and startups relying on Mercury for financial services may need to seek alternatives. I did hear that 90% of their compliance obligations were basically for like 1% of their accounts, and so it just wasn't sustainable.
De minimis, yeah. Next up, our daily dose of Schadenfreude. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez was found guilty on July 16th of accepting bribes as a foreign agent, including gold bars and a luxury car in exchange for his political clout. The irony of the conviction is that Menendez often cited Bitcoin as the, quote, ideal currency for criminals. Menendez's sentencing is scheduled for October 29th, my wife's birthday. Should have invested in Bitcoin, bro. I don't know what you were thinking. That was a mistake.
That's right. If you want to take bribes, why are you taking gold bars and luxury cars? Take Bitcoin. Yeah, he knew about it. He just dismissed it. Should have taken his own advice. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do bribery. Politicians, come on. Let's be better. All right. Grayscale, the ETF company, has launched a new fund for decentralized AI. The fund will finance 3 key areas: AI services, addressing problems related to centralized AI, and developing AI-related infrastructure.
That is a banner day for Block and Order because that is the first time we completed the lightning round on time. Well done, Mr. Moish. Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Block and Order. A very special thank you to Jonathan Mann and Brian Frye for the really exciting discussion, and we're really looking forward to seeing what comes up or what comes next with that litigation. So stay tuned to future episodes, and please feel free to follow them on Twitter and follow their pursuit of justice in the wake of in the face of injustice. Remember to like and subscribe and follow us on all our socials. The links are down below in the show notes. Of course, drop a comment below if there's a particular topic you'd like us to cover. Nothing that we discuss here on the show is meant to be construed as legal and financial advice, especially about taking bribes. Please consult your own attorney if you're going to take the plunge. Neither discussion nor the fact that we own assets or products that we discuss in this show is meant to be serve as an endorsement of said assets. Very special thank you to producer Abby, the OG producer. Without her, the show would not be possible. So on behalf of Moish Peltz, I'm Kyle Lawrence. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
I'm Moish Peltz. Take care, everyone.